cloud.
Yep, perfect.
Connecting to the server. To the people that have entered, welcome to our webinar tonight. We appreciate you being here. I did start the recording. We have a good amount of time, so as our wonderful speakers are presenting, you are actually welcome to ask a question, and we'll keep moving along. Please use the chat button also, and we'll stop periodically to check the chat and answer questions. If we don't get to everyone's questions, or that you have more after we sign off and start thinking about everything, you can always follow up. We're happy to answer all questions. We are recording the meeting and we will post it. We also have a bunch of resources posted already on the Mercer County Sustainability Coalition website. A lot of green infrastructure information, even things for projects, science projects for kids. So I hope you can enjoy that. We'll also follow up with an email with all the resources as well. People are rolling on in. Yay. I'm just going to start to share my screen. Dun, 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 dun. Slideshow from the beginning. Sophie, I can't see the chat when I'm presenting. So while I'm presenting, if you can monitor the chat, that would be awesome.
That would be my pleasure.
And to be respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to get going. It's 7:04. Welcome to Green Infrastructure in Your Neighborhood. This is a part of the Mercer County Sustainability Coalition's Greening Together event. Every year, the coalition puts on a Green Fest, normally at Rider University, but because of COVID, last year it didn't happen. This is the first year I'm involved, and we decided to do it all online with a few events in person, like the stream cleanups with the help of the water run by the Watershed Institute. And we decided to stretch it out. Instead of one day, it is all week. So we have one more day after tonight, Friday, that's all about trees. And anyone in Lawrence, I don't know if you know this, but the engineering department, Brenda in engineering, has some seedlings, some willow oak, and there were a few dogwood left as well. So you can contact her and pick up a seedling. Tomorrow, the Shade Tree Commission is planting a bunch of trees in Lawrence. I think that's happening in a lot of townships. Oops, got to go back. Our agenda. I'm Annette Loveless. I am a part of Sustainable Lawrence, and I'm the chair of the Lawrence Township Environmental and Green Advisory Committee. Every township or municipality has a number of committees and commissions made up of volunteers that that help to advise the township. People in the township can't do everything, so they need residents to lend some support. And anyone can volunteer. You just need to find out about your committees And you can go to the meetings. They're all open meetings. Just check your township website or give your clerk a call. We have two speakers tonight, Kory Kreiseder and Sophie, both of the wonderful Watershed Institute, our local watershed advocacy group. I'm going to frame the reason we're here tonight. It's all about stormwater. Number one, we have too much. In New Jersey, we've had 3.5 more inches of precipitation between this century and the first part of the previous century. And if you do the calculations, that's about 526 billion more gallons of water each year in New Jersey. New Jersey is also going to be the first state to approach the first state to reach build out. We're approaching build out. That means that any land that's permitted to be built on, it's going to be built on. That means there's a lot more impervious cover or hard surfaces. We're also having more frequent, intense storms. So it's not just more water, it's more water all at once. That leads to flooding as well as nuisance flooding. Down in the lower left, that's Trenton. That was after Hurricane or Tropical Storm Irene. And you can see the road is flooded there. And this is a picture of the South Ward. Often the problems hit the most vulnerable population the most. Over a little more to the right, there's a picture behind Colonial Lake, the outfall of Colonial Lake, where the water just comes out when we have a storm, just comes out and it hits that bank, and it's just tearing away that stream bank there and eroding the bank. As it's eroding the bank, it's also taking all that soil with it, and all that sediment is just traveling down. All that water, all that sediment, all the pollution is running straight down into Trenton. And that last picture is behind Captain Paul's hot dog stand. We have often floods around there, and that washes out the road. Ironically, I don't know if it's ironic, but coincidentally, strangely, we have too much. We also have too little. With more of that impervious cover and the more storms, there's just less ability for that stormwater to infiltrate. That means there's less groundwater recharge. That means the stream levels are lower. That creates water scarcity and drought. Our last major drought in Mercer County was just back in 2016, late 2016, early 2017. Down at the bottom, I have a table from the Mercer County Hazard Mitigation Plan. And this is a chart from 2015. And you can see the probability of future drought events in Mercer County is, well, my screen's blocked, but it's about it's over 60% annually for drought. New Jersey is also the most populous state in the country, and so our clean water demands are increasing. I have a picture here on the left that shows the what happens in the natural water cycle, where a lot of evapotranspiration happens, and there's recharge, and there's only about 10% runoff. But in a city situation, this would be Trenton, where there's 75 to 100% impervious cover. You have very little, there's no place for the rainwater to go. It's just washing out, it's flooding everything. There's no infiltration. In Mercer County, we have, and Lawrence Township, we have between just over 18% impervious cover to around 50% of impervious cover, depending on where you are in the township. And of course, it's too dirty. More than 90% of New Jersey waters are polluted. Now, there's two kinds of pollution, basically, point source pollution and non-point source pollution. There's three major laws that have really helped with pollution. The Federal Clean Water Act, the New Jersey Water Quality Planning Act, and the New Jersey Pollution Control Act. And that's helped our waters tremendously, especially from factories and manufacturing. So now the number one source of pollution is non-point source pollution. Basically, that's stormwater runoff. It's raining, it's flowing over all those hard surfaces, the agricultural land, the beautiful lawns full of fertilizer, and it's going directly into our stream. I mentioned fertilizer. Well, that's great for our lawns and our plants. It's nutrients, and it helps things grow and turn green, but then it flows into our streams and water, and it makes things grow in there too. HABs are harmful algal blooms. HABs are actually cyanobacteria. So Colonial Lake, Rosedale Lake, all our lakes have these blooms of cyanobacteria. It's not always toxic, but it can be. So just below, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but there's some cyanobacteria that looks like spilled paint. Just below that, we have the pea soup. And then in the bottom far right corner, that's filamentous algae. So that's not a cyanobacteria, it's an algae, but you could see it's just like a sheet, and it just covers the bottom of the water, and it makes it hard for our little macroinvertebrates and living things to function. We also have pathogens. I don't have a picture of poop here, but that's where some pathogens come into play. We have, I just learned from Goosebusters today out at Colonial Lake that there are 800,000 resident Canada geese in New Jersey. The Canada goose is actually a migratory bird, but they've taken a lot of them, 800,000 of them have taken up residence in New Jersey. And one goose can poop out 1 pound of poop. And that's all of that goes into our streams and lakes and whatnot. Then there's our dogs and our cats, et cetera, our cows, et cetera. Low dissolved oxygen is very much a problem because all the algae and the bacteria, as well as the leaves and the mulch that come off of our lawns and don't get picked up and are in our street, goes right down into, right down the drain and into our waters. When it's decomposing, it needs oxygen. So it's taking up all the oxygen that's in the water. And so again, our macroinvertebrates, our fish, can't live there. As the storm water is running over all the hard surfaces, the impervious cover, it's hot. And so we have thermal pollution, and that also kills all the little creatures in our streams and waterways. On the top right, I have a picture of the new development across from Town Hall. And you can see there's a silt fence there, but it's not holding the soil. And so all the soil is running down into the street and into the storm drain. And that's pollution, that's sediment, and that's going right into our waterways as well. And then below that, I have a picture of from the neighborhood where somebody was having a puddle in their yard. So they dug this little trench and a lot of that soil is just running out into the street. When an easy solution would have been to just dig the trench and have it go into the woods. Road salt, that's a big one. We have fresh water, not salt water. So all that salt's, again, going into our streams and it's killing the living things there. It's also terrible for our pipes. Sediment, I spoke about sediment. So I have this chart here. Anything over 10% impervious cover, you're gonna have trouble with your water. Okay, I am going to end my slideshow. So that kind of sets up some of our issues. We talked about that last night as well with Steve from the Watershed Institute and Tom from Colonial Lake Park. And we're focusing on solutions tonight. And our first speaker is Kory Kreiseder from the Watershed. And she's been with the Watershed since April 2017 as the stormwater specialist. She manages the Watershed Institute's green infrastructure training. She advises property owners and municipalities on stormwater management issues and maintenance, and she teaches about the environment, ecological benefits of native plants. Previously, she was with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District with Fairfax County, Virginia, where she was an urban conservation specialist who advised homeowners on landscape options for resolving drainage and erosion issues. Kory received her master's of landscape architecture from the University of Maryland, College Park, and her undergraduate degree from DePaul University in Chicago. I spent about, what was that, about 4 hours, Kory, the other day, walking around Lawrence Township and checking things out. I've learned so much from you, and we look forward to seeing what you have, sorry, I didn't stop sharing, what you have to show us today. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Annette. I appreciate the introduction. And let me see. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Oh, looks like it's working now. Okay. All right, so thanks again, Annette. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about green infrastructure in your neighborhood and how you are able to help the environment, how you're able to capture your own stormwater, which also, as Annette was pointing out, picks up pollutants, how you're able to capture that and help it to be a benefit instead of something that we're trying to get off of our property right away. So the agenda that we're going to have, I'm going to do the first 6 points, and then I'm going to switch it over to Sophie Glovier, and she's going to cover a couple of things. But we're going to go over why do we need green infrastructure? Why do we need to capture and filter our stormwater? What is our impact, and can we make a difference? Different options. There's some things that are more on an industrial scale. So I focused in on residential, and I'll give you resources for all of those as well. And then we all need to do our part. So just kind of a wrap up of everything that I discuss. And then Sophie will be discussing addressing flooding through municipal policy, our river friendly program, and how we can work together to address flooding on a neighborhood scale. And as I'm going along, if Annette or Sophie, as you're looking at questions that come in, if you feel like interrupting me, please feel free to go ahead and do that. I would be happy to answer the questions as they come along. So I know that you've learned a lot about why we need it, some of the different issues that are going on. But there was a couple of things I wanted to point out. So I won't touch on everything because I know Steve and Tom talked to you about it last night. And Annette has just mentioned a couple of things, but it's really important that we do capture our stormwater. And some of the things that are taking place is we have, due to clearing our forests, our vegetated areas, and construction, we're creating like little stormwater rivers. It's not necessarily an area that usually water would flow through as a stream, but when it rains, there's definitely a stream that shows up. Our basements are getting flooded, but another thing that's happening is we're starting to have standing water on soils that seem like they should be perking. There shouldn't be an issue with water absorption, and we're starting to see that more often. Other things, I don't know if you notice what the issue here is on the top right, but our downspouts, are we aware of where our downspouts are outfalling to? And here, the buildings are pretty close and the downspouts are pointed right at the neighbors. So we're flooding our neighbors besides ourselves. And another thing that's taking place is erosion. And Annette showed an example of Colonial Lake with the erosion that's taking place there just on the other side of the dam. But what I wanted to point out on this series of pictures on the lower right, how fast erosion takes place. So this is a tributary to Harry's Brook in Princeton. And I was there in May of 2017 for the first time and was really impressed at how much the stream had eroded. So that's the center picture. And I decided to look on Google Earth from August of 2011, what it looked like. So in that August of 2011 picture, you can see that it's eroded, and it's probably about 1 to 2 feet deep with erosion. And then by 2017, I would say it was about 3 to 4 feet deep. But then I went back there in December of 2018, and it was more like 6 to 8 feet deep. And I have my car circled in that red circle there, is actually parked in the same place that the truck with the little backhoe on it is parked in the middle picture. So it has eroded about 6 to 8 feet, but that doesn't include what is going on down below the water. I couldn't quite tell how deep it was in the water, how it had incised, which is the term that you use when it's getting deeper due to erosion. But if you look close, you can see that there's a pipe of some kind that's going through the stream there. So that is one of the concerns that takes place is we have our infrastructure that's crossing underneath our waterways. And as it starts to erode away, those pipes become exposed, and it can become a real danger if something large were to come down that stream during a storm and rupture that pipe. So we need to try and capture our stormwater. Stormwater is a precious resource that supplies our drinking water, and it replenishes our aquifers and water bodies. And until recently, we've been treating it like a nuisance. So why do we need to capture and filter our stormwater? And all of these things are common sites on our property, including washing our cars, chemicals that are used on our plants, de-icing salts, dog waste and bird waste, leaky cars, poor grass or plant coverage, like what you see in the lower left-hand side. Without having good plant coverage, your yard starts to just erode away, and that erosion turns into sediment and soil particles in our waterways. And if you're on a busy road, the image on the upper left-hand side, people just throw their trash, especially cigarette butts, out the window, and you have all these little pieces of trash all over the place, and that ends up in our waterways as well. And all of these things end up, hitting our storm drains, and you see it floating down the river. But not only that, the other reason why we need to capture and filter our stormwater is because people fish. They eat what they catch out of these waterways, and kids will play in any water body that they can find. So that's another thing that is really important to keep in mind, is that this could be a source of food and it could be a source of play. It's not just a water body that's sitting there for our enjoyment. And I just wanted to point out another form of pollution, which Annette mentioned too, and that's the hot surfaces. And the hot surfaces, what's important to know about that is when it rains and the water hits those hot pavements, like what you see in the lower right-hand side, that hot water ends up hitting our storm sewers and going into the stream. But what's in the stream? It's not fish that enjoy being in hot water or organisms in there. It's aquatics that like cool water. So as soon as we send hot water into those water bodies, it ends up killing the good creatures that we want in that water. So these are all examples of what is going on. And just if you think polluted stormwater dilutes as it meets up with other water, like a gallon of polluted stormwater meeting up with 500 gallons, it'll become diluted. Think again, this satellite image of the Chesapeake Bay in the center there shows what it looked like after, I believe it was Tropical Storm Lee in 2011. And you can see all that sediment and pollution and God only knows what else floating down the bay and headed out to the ocean. So all really important to try and capture and keep our stormwater on our property. So what is our impact and can we make a difference? There are a lot of things that lead to pollution, and some of that are improper disposal of yard waste and other trash. All of this ends up leading to blockage of storm sewers, and therefore flooding, which causes a lot of extra work for our municipalities. Now, this picture in the top left, which is framed in red, is actually my neighbor, and every time he cuts his grass, he blows all of his grass or all of his leaves into the storm sewer, which is indicated with that red arrow. And I've tried talking to him about it. He has been fined by the municipality, and yet he continues to do it, and he won't explain why he's doing it. There has to be a reason, but he's not explaining it. So he continues to blow it into the storm sewer every week during the growing season. And then the two images that are framed in blue shows a school that I had gone to look at their stormwater issues that they were having. And what you see on the left side is quite a bit of water standing there, and it definitely looked like a swale to me. So I went walking to try and find where it was supposed to go to, and ended up finding what looked like a flat area and started moving the leaves around. So as soon as I found that storm sewer and moved that storm grate and moved the leaves off to the side, it drained right away. Now, this was not intentional. It was just buildup of leaves. But just from that buildup, you can see what happens. And for people who are intentionally dumping things, like the image that you see on the bottom left there is trash that was cleaned up 2 years ago at the Ewing Home Depot during our stream cleanup. And I know that water over by the Home Depot ends up in Colonial Lake. this is just a dumping ground for people. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on. We did collect a lot of trash. It seemed like a lot of it was maybe contractor waste. There were what wasn't shown in this picture was just the massive amount of plastic bags that we collected, and they were all Home Depot bags. So people get their product, purchase whatever they need from Home Depot, they make their way out to the car and they don't need the bag. So the bag gets thrown on the ground, and it was really impressive the amount of bags we got.
That's terrible. Ugh.
Yeah. Yes, it was really interesting. So that plus people illegally or intentionally, I shouldn't say illegally, but intentionally, improperly disposing of yard waste and throwing it into stormwater drainage areas ends up leading to flooding. And then during a storm, our municipalities are out there trying to unplug the issue area. And I even have not the neighbor that you see in the picture here, but I have neighbors here, 3 of them, who are having a terrible time in their yard because of flooding, but they have a stormwater drainage area behind their yard, and all of them for years have been dumping all their yard waste into that ditch. So now it's to the point to where they need a backhoe to come in and dig it out because there is such a huge amount of stuff in there. But in the meantime, they're getting flooded until that can happen. So we definitely need to think about what we do with our yard waste. And I will tell you, these leaves being shoved into a storm drain or into a ditch is like it's like gold. Those leaves are amazing with how full of nutrients and how valuable they are for our plants in the fall, which I'll go over in just a few minutes. So what I did here was I did a quick drawing on a house on the left that maybe is what it looks like when you first purchase it. And the arrows are indicating where the water is flowing. And then compared to what the house looks like some years later, when maybe your family has grown and you've decided to make some changes to the property. So it's all hypothetical, but I'm just trying to give you a visual so that you understand how valuable our collection of our stormwater is for neighbors. So the house on the left, when you first buy it, with the house, the driveway, the sidewalk, the patio, let's say it's 3,000 square feet. So 3,000 square feet times 0.6 will end up giving you, the answer will give you gallons produced in a 1-inch rainstorm. And I believe it's about 1,800 gallons. But what's really great about this house is that you have 4 massive trees there. They're mature oak trees. And if you end up going to the tree benefit calculator, which you can just Google that and that'll pop up, and put in your zip code and the size tree that you have, it'll tell you that each one of these trees can collect, and this is all hypothetical, but each one of these hypothetical trees can collect up to 24,000 gallons of water in 1 year. So you've got a house that ends up producing 1,800 gallons in a 1-inch rainstorm, but you've got 100,000 gallons worth of sponges sitting there. But as time goes on, you end up creating these additions, and with the shed, the patio, maybe a pool, adding an addition, maybe increasing the size of your front walkway, this could end up equating to 4,640 square feet. But because of all of this work that you've done and maybe trees getting diseased, you've lost 3 trees. So what happens is now you've created an extra almost 2,800 gallons of water on top of the original 1,800, and you're missing 3 trees that used to absorb 75,000 gallons of water. And it doesn't take much time, but just by little things that we do on our own property, we can make huge differences to our neighbors and to ourselves. So these are all some things, some of the things that, you know, easily happen in our own yards that end up affecting ourselves and others. So if your downspouts are buried, it's easy for them to get crushed over time just from mowing the lawn and walking over it with the mower. And that ends up backflowing against our foundation. We know that water flows downhill, but where does it go? There might be, you know, little tiny little dams and roots that redirect water in ways that we don't expect. Our clay soils end up becoming compacted, and from us just mowing the lawn, could be from kids playing out there, could be from the shade of the tree, and that ends up holding water, or even from loss of trees, as I was saying, or incorrectly placed trees or hardscaping that might be damming the water. And the other thing that I just want to suggest to you is maybe going on Google Earth, which is the not just Google Maps, but Google Earth. And you can go back in history to see what has been taking place. So this is an example of one neighborhood that I looked at recently. And I believe it is, 2006 on the left compared to 2018. And you can see there is tree canopy loss in all of those circles. And 1 acre of mature forest can absorb 550,000 gallons of water. So to lose this many trees really lets you know how people downhill are being affected. And a lot of times the person who loses the tree will say, my basement is wet for the first time in any kind of recent memory or ever. So it's important to just keep track of our trees and what's dying or what is going to be taken down, and prepare for the effects of that. So, I'm sorry, the top label there is not quite correct, but what I'm trying to show here is the topographical map for Colonial Lake. And these are in 2-foot intervals. And what we were trying to do is just look at the overall neighborhood surrounding the lake. Water flows off of those topo lines perpendicularly. So it flows off at a right angle. And all of the storm sewers end up outfalling into the lake. So these arrows all show you how the water is flowing off of the properties there. And this, I can provide this map as well for people if they're interested, to be able to determine how water is flowing off of their property to affect their neighbors. So these are some of the mitigation techniques, some of the ways that you can collect your stormwater, slow your stormwater, stop your stormwater in residential properties. One is a rain garden. Then you have residential reforestation. It's something that people don't often think about. They think, well, I've got all these mature trees. And I always think, yeah, but what if one dies? You're not, if you have to take it down for whatever reason, you have to cut it down. You're not going to get a mature tree overnight. It may not even happen in your lifetime. So think about maybe planting some trees where you think you can fit them in, because you're not sure how long the other trees are left for this world on your property. Green roofs are another idea. And for those who are interested in that, it is a possibility for residential homes. Aerating your lawn, putting in a vegetated filter, and I'm going to go over each one of these so that you fully understand and know where to look for more help. Cisterns, porous pavement, and downspout planters are all other options. And it might be a good idea as a community, as a neighborhood, to try and create a, capturing every drop where it falls kind of campaign, or, excuse me, once yearly having a tree planting, maybe trying to have a rain garden in each yard, and definitely removing invasives. They are, there's a lot of them that are taking over, and removing them would not only benefit the ecosystem, but also give you that extra space to put in a native plant that does a whole lot more water absorption than a non-native. And just in case you're curious, if you go in the tree benefit calculator and you compare, let's say, a Japanese maple to a red maple, you'll see a big difference in how much each one absorbs. So a Japanese maple that maybe is 10 inches in diameter may collect, I believe it's somewhere around 1,700 gallons, and a red maple of the same size collects somewhere around 5,000 gallons. So
Is that per year?
That's per year, yes. So definitely consider removing your non-natives and replacing them with something that's native to our area. So rain gardens, there's a lot of different options for rain gardens. They really are not that difficult to install. And that is something that I can end up providing more information on. If anybody is interested in any of these techniques, they can always reach out to me at the Watershed, and I can help give guidance on how to go about installing them yourself, or giving guidance on somebody who can install them for you. But this is a cross section of a typical rain garden for a residence. And usually for a residential property, you won't put in a perforated pipe. You would do that in a larger, more industrial sized rain garden. But because of our clay soils, it might be something to put in as an under drain system. I prefer putting in plants that can handle our clay soils, and just making sure that when that rain garden overflows, because it will, you'll design it for, let's say you design it for a 1-inch rainstorm. If we get a 2-inch rainstorm, it's going to overflow. So you just want to make sure that it's overflowing to an area that will not cause property damage. And you also want to make sure that your rain garden is at least 10 feet away from any foundation, because otherwise it has the likelihood of flooding your basement. So just make sure it's 10 feet away.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
This looks like a flower bed to me. Why is it a rain garden?
See, yes, this is what I'm trying to say. Don't just put in a flower garden, put in a garden that works for you, because it is a flower garden. All you have to do is dig down. So for residents, and I'll show you on the next slide, actually I'll show you now, these are the manuals you can use. The one on the left is the Rain Garden Manual of New Jersey by Rutgers University. The other one is the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. But all you have to do is dig a pit, you fill it with rain garden soil, and you plant it with your favorite native plants. That also, there are plant lists in these manuals as well. So it is a flower garden. So create one that does some work instead of just looking pretty. So the other option is doing the residential reforestation, like I mentioned. And I know there's a lot going on here. So what I'm trying to show is your resource. And if you go to Jersey Friendly Yards, it is a fantastic website that is loaded with information. And I've done a blow up here of this section right here. So if you go in and click on your location here. So I think for most of us, we're going to be in the Piedmont. So you click on Piedmont and then go down to plant type, which here I selected trees, and native plants only. They do have non-natives that they list, but I'm highly recommending using native plants, although there are some non-natives that I like. So if it's not invasive, I do think it's okay to have a couple of non-natives. Deer resistance, and then what's super important is the soil type, the soil moisture, and light requirements. So you click all that in there and boom, it gives you right plant, right place. All the plants that can survive on your property. And around the Colonial Lakes area, there is a massive amount of, different regions for if it's drier soils, if it's super wet soils. Some of you'll dig down 6 inches and you'll be hitting groundwater. So you're going to want to make sure that you can have plants that can handle that type of environment. And I just showed pictures here of 2 of my favorite trees, which can handle both drier and wet areas. And the top one is Nissus sylvatica, which is a black gum, and it's a slower growing but large tree, and it's very strong. And the bottom one is a pawpaw, and I love pawpaws. They grow in groves and they have that kind of tropical look to them. I think they're a part of the papaya family. And if you've never had a pawpaw before, they're fantastic. When I lived in the DC area, the towpath along the Potomac was loaded with pawpaws, and everybody was out there picking them. You would plan to get out there and pick them when they got ripe, and everybody else picked them before I did. So I never got a chance to see them, but this is what they look like, the fruit, and they grow in groves. So I have 5 that I planted in my yard, and they do colonize. So we had 14 that showed up over the winter. So this spring, I've got 14 extra trees that are now showing up, and they're a small understory tree that get about, I believe it's 8 to 12 feet tall. For those of you who are overachievers and really want that green roof, I love them. It's like my favorite garden. The picture on the top left is what our green roof looks like at the Watershed. You can see what the layers look like that would be necessary for the green roof, and what the soil media looks like in my hand in that picture. And this is just another picture to the far right of a green roof, which I believe is a tray system. So they don't have all that layering off to the left. Over on the right, all they have is something that protects their roof, some kind of waterproofing membrane, and then that is the tray system of sedum. So I would highly recommend going with a reputable company like Roof Meadow. They're ones, the contractor that we use, and I highly recommend them. I'm sure there's others out there, but I have not worked with them. So that's the one I recommend. Unless you're interested in doing a DIY on your shed or your birdhouse or your doghouse, that's another option. Then aeration for your turf is another option. And this is just showing what aeration is. So what you do is you aerate it with the machine. It ends up putting all these holes in the ground, which look like goose droppings. You overseed it with really good grass seed. You can buy some really bad grass seed, so it's worth it to invest in higher end, more expensive grass seed. And then just mulching your leaves into those holes, and mulching your leaf is just running over it with the lawnmower. But this aeration does great things. It helps with water absorption. It builds up organic material, it reduces soil compaction, creates a thicker turf, and your roots end up growing deeper. Oh, my Chicago accent almost came out when I said roots grow deeper. And then when should you do this? In the fall. I know a lot of people say, oh, you should do it in the spring too, but a lot of times in the spring it's wet. And so you might cause more compaction depending on the type of aerator you use, because some of them are on like a steel roller. So it's just something to keep in mind. Then there's the vegetated filter. And basically that is, I didn't catch you ask that last question, but basically it's a pretty flower bed, but it's graded so that it's flat. And what's meant to happen is water is supposed to go through it as sheet flow. And sheet flow means it's just, you know, like a steady flow that's coming off of your yard. And they do great at the bottom of yards, bottom of the hill of a yard, or your driveway if it's sloped in the right direction. But these are all examples of vegetated filters. And I just wanted to point out that on the right side there, these fellas are putting in a filter that is, the finished product is right below it. And that may not look like much to you, but we planted it intentionally with one plant because it's going to be maintained by a municipality. And so we just want them to cut it back once a year. And if they cut the shrubs back too, it's okay, they're gonna grow back. But we wanted it to be simple for them to be able to ID weeds as they come in. So the simpler the palette, the plant palette, the easier it is for them to ID weeds as they creep in. And if this is something that you want to do, oh, and I'm sorry, where I was going with this is the guys in the top right corner are adding some rain garden soil. It's not necessary, you don't have to do that, but we were just trying to create a little bit more sponginess so that it would capture more water. And I think we ended up putting in 6 inches of rain garden soil in that vegetated filter. But if you're interested in more technical, more specs on that, you can Google the New Jersey Stormwater BMP manual and find out more information. And then just to, this kind of goes with the vegetated filter, shrinking your lawns. On the New Jersey Friendly Yards website, they have this really cool interactive yard that you can use. And it shows you how you can shrink your lawn. So you start out with what you see on the left, and after you add everything that you want to add, it ends up looking the way it does on the right. And it's really a great resource to use to try and figure out how to shrink your lawn. Another idea is to install cisterns. And so these are some different options. The really pretty red one in the center there is a DIY that I ended up finding. And I was using it to show that you can use cisterns in place of screening shrubs to be able to give you some privacy. So if you're thinking, oh, well, we're so close to our neighbors, but I have no place to put this because I've got all these shrubs here, maybe putting a cistern there is an idea. You can always paint your rain barrel. You can decorate it with some wood. I found this, what I thought was cool at the time, this rain bench that somebody did that was a DIY. But then after I looked at it now, it looks more like a casket to me. So I think it's creepy now, but it's an idea. So, and just to keep in mind too, that garage, that oversized garage I showed a few slides back was like 864 square feet. If you were going to put a rain barrel on that garage to capture all of its stormwater in a 1-inch rainstorm, you would need 10 55-gallon drum rain barrels. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind too. Oh, and these are just 2 other examples of people, reusing things to use as a rain barrel. And those, I think they're called water hogs, are really skinny. They're 110 gallons rain barrels that can be hooked together and capture more water, but they can be placed in an area that is a little tighter in space. Pervious paving is another option. And I know this is really expensive. The pavers aren't really so expensive. What's expensive is what is underneath it. So bringing in all that stone to be able to capture and hold the stormwater that hits it. So what I was trying to show here is on the top left, if this is something that is of interest to you, maybe just putting in the two wheel slots to be able to capture water there, or on the right-hand side, what they did is they had your traditional asphalt driveway, but they put in like a little inlay of porous pavement to be able to use as their stormwater capturing area. Another idea is, and I'll know my time is running out, so I'm coming to the end here. Another idea is the downspout planters. And these are all different examples. Sometimes it's called a rain garden in a box. This, I'm showing you a cross section of what a downspout planter looks like. And this example here that's in the top center is actually, it looks like a retaining wall because it is, that yard is sloped in such a way that it is not only capturing sheet flow from the neighbor, but it's also where the yellow arrow is, shows you how the downspout is then connected to this downspout planter to outfall into the planter. And it goes on, it has quite a few different levels and as it goes along the entire length of the yard. There's an architect in Princeton who likes to use these concrete like pipes to use for the downspout planters. The one on the bottom left is just a super simple example of just using timbers to be able to capture stormwater. And then the one in the center is of a feeding, an animal feed container where the water from a very small roof is going into, but that is capturing water that used to flood the basement, I'm sorry, not the basement, but the driveway that goes down below the foundation there. So it has nowhere to go. So by just putting in this little downspout planter, it's capturing quite a bit of water, at least to ease the flooding that had been taking place on the driveway. And then the bottom right there just shows you the stormwater diverter that you just pop open in the spring when everything thaws. And then when it's wintertime, you close it up so that the water ends up continuing on its way so that you don't end up creating a mess over the winter with ice. So what's next? We all need to do our part. So we need to plant natives. The monarch caterpillar there on the word escapes me. Milkweed, I think is like the gateway drug for people who really are like, I don't really like this. I'm not a real big fan of bugs. But as soon as I get, and that was me, landscape architect who doesn't like bugs, but that particular plant is what made me realize, oh, I love this. Look at how cool this is. So that one I highly recommend. And then just capturing your stormwater and then disposing of your trash or yard waste properly and participating in stream cleanups. It's super fun, especially if you're at the Ewing Home Depot. And I heard, I don't know where they were at this past weekend, but Ewing had another very active stream cleanup. So definitely check one of those out. And then maybe consider putting in community rain gardens. And the other thing I just wanted to point out before I hand it over to Sophie is I hear that there's a lot of people out there that are scared of nature, and I can completely understand that. But what I wanted to show you is this particular case study. And if you go on flutterbymeadows.com, this is a homeowner in, that is also a member of our river-friendly community. And what they did, if you look here in the upper left, this is how their yard started out. They had this detention basin behind their house, and it was god awful ugly, as all of them are. And it was barren. They didn't like looking at it, and they thought, you know what, we can do something with this. So they ended up paying to have it naturalized. So this lower right corner is what it looks like. It's spectacular. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then just from the neighbor's yard on this top right side, that's what their home looks like from the neighbor. However, they still like their manicured yard. So if you looked at it from a satellite view, you would see all of this amazing, native plants all around them with still their manicured turf, because some people like that. But they did tell me that not only are they seeing all of this wonderful stuff taking place, and that it takes them now 45 minutes to walk down their short, like 60-foot driveway, because they stop and look at all of this great stuff that's happening. But they used to have a tremendous issue with mice in their house before they planted all of this. So when it looked like this down here, terrible mouse problem in their house. Now that they planted this, they've created habitat for mice. Mice don't want to come into their house. They don't have a rodent problem anymore because the rodents are staying out here because they don't want anything else. And by having that out there, it's the circle of life. We've got birds of prey and other things coming out and feeding on that. And it's really an incredible, magical place to be able to just learn about our environment. So it's well worth the time and the effort to be able to change things over. And I realized that my last slide of resources is not included. So I will make sure that I include that for all of you when I hand over my presentation for you, Annette. So I'm going to hand it over to Sophie unless there's any questions.
We did have a couple of questions that came in specifically for you.
Okay.
Number one, do the deer like pawpaw?
Oh,
Your
that's
pawpaw
a good question. I don't have deer here. So I don't know. I didn't even think about that. Probably they're such good fruit, but there are deer all over Washington, D.C. and walking up and down the trail along the Potomac, and they weren't eating those pawpaw.
Someone did mention when the tree is young, yeah, you'll need to fence it anyway. Fence in anything that's young because the deer will eat anything. I have a beautiful pawpaw tree, but it is very mature and they don't seem to like it. Another question. How can we find, like, leaving leaves and mulching and fertilizing and leaves as compost, people can really see the benefit. How can we convince people that keeping their stormwater on the site is a benefit?
Well, if they're getting flooded, or if they have neighbors that are getting flooded, or if they like to drink water, it is a good idea to keep your stormwater on your site so that it has an opportunity to soak into the aquifer, because once it hits that storm drain, it is a lost resource. It does not soak into the ground. It hits the streams and it ends up going down the rivers and out into the ocean.
Thank you. I'm going to are there any other questions? I'm going to introduce Sophie. Sophie Glovier is the Assistant Policy Director at the Watershed Institute, where she works with both citizens and local government to develop and implement strong environmental policy. She served for 4 years as chair of the Princeton Environmental Commission and is a team member of Sea Change Conversations. helping to educate about the risks of climate change. Sophie's the author of Walk the Trails in and Around Princeton, which I love, and is the recipient of the DNR Greenway Land Trust Donald B. Jones Award and Sustainable Princeton's Leadership Award. She's a graduate of Princeton University and Columbia Business School, and she received a postmaster's certificate in sustainability strategy from the New School. I know Sophie as a person that I talk to all the time with all sorts of questions, and she immediately responds. I also know that she's going to a ginormous amount of town council meetings, environmental committee meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight, Sophie.
Well, Annette, thank you and everybody in Lawrence for inviting us to be part of your Greening Mercer presentation and for all the work that you do. I think we've all learned a lot from Tom's presentation last night and Steve's and Kory's today. And Kory's focused on how residents and neighborhoods can integrate green infrastructure under their properties. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about the important role that our government, and particularly our local government, has to play in order to scale the use of green infrastructure. Because we can all work in our backyard, but our municipalities have all kinds of different properties, and we really need to scale the use of this solution using plants and soil to clean the stormwater. So importantly, the state has just made a very big step forward. The stormwater management rules from the state had not been updated since 2004. And as of this year, as of March 2nd, new regulations have gone into place requiring that green infrastructure be used when there is a new development, a new what's called major development. So a major development is defined as a project that will disturb more than an acre of land or add a quarter acre or more of impervious surface. So anytime that happens now, we're going to see green infrastructure go in, which is really exciting. And also the focus is really on distributed smaller scale green infrastructure. So no longer are you going to see a really large detention basin going in with the development. You're going to see rain gardens and pervious pavement and likely a combination of different green infrastructure strategies. It's important to note that the state allows municipalities to what quote unquote undertake additional actions, including ordinances with standards stronger than the statewide minimum. So as background, an ordinance is a local law, and a town's stormwater management ordinance governs the requirements within its borders. So what that's saying is that the state has gone quite a distance already, but towns that are having serious issues with flooding and water quality can go further and require additional stormwater management. So Kory, if you would just flip the slide. So we've heard that in Lawrence, the impervious cover is at 18%. And we know from Steve's presentation last night that when impervious cover is above 10%, waterways become compromised. So we know that a lot of the development that's going to take place in our communities is going to be redevelopment, because we have so much that's already developed. And there is currently no state level requirement to add green infrastructure when properties are redeveloped. So just contrast this image of the Lawrence Shopping Center with a shopping mall in Nashville that has included green infrastructure. And imagine the impact that adding trees and native plantings when properties are redeveloped could have on flooding, heat island effect, and the quality of water that runs into waterways like the Assunpink Creek. So this is something that we really would recommend working towards. And in order to do that, we need to educate community members and elected officials about the importance of requiring green infrastructure when properties are redeveloped. Because unless we address these properties, these legacy properties, we're not going to be able to meaningfully improve our serious water-related issues. So next slide, please, Kory. Something else I wanted to talk to you about is funding for green infrastructure, because we are all already paying for stormwater related costs, particularly those associated with flooding. And the state recently passed a law allowing something called a stormwater utility. A stormwater utility is a dedicated funding mechanism to pay for a community's stormwater management program. So much like there is a gas, electric, or water or sewer utility, a stormwater utility assesses a user fee based on the property owner's usage of the system. So in this case, your fee would be charged based on how much hard surface you had, so your rooftops and your pavement. And then the revenue that's generated from the fee would support the stormwater related services and improvements that the community needs. So without a stormwater utility, the price of managing stormwater is included in other local government costs. So typically those costs are sewer fees or property taxes. And so what happens is often there's an underinvestment in managing stormwater, lending itself to a strategy of deferred maintenance to focus on higher profile needs. And unfortunately, this common strategy results in residents bearing the brunt of flooding, water pollution, and property damage. Princeton is currently investigating the feasibility of a stormwater utility. It is a long process and a complicated process, but as we face costs from flooding and changes in climate that are going to drive those causes up, it's something that we need to think about as citizens. So in order to make the right decisions about and really understand what our costs are and who's paying them, it's important that we collect information about problems with flooding. So if you are experiencing problems with flooding, it's important to let your town engineering department or your elected officials know. And we are also working to track flooding. So we have a map on our website. Here's the link. You can also access it by just going to our website and putting flood map into the search bar. So if you experience flooding or if you come to an intersection that's completely flooded out and can just snap a picture and post it, that will help us to collect the information and to have it as a resource for your municipality. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is related to educating ourselves and our communities, and that is our River Friendly program. So we would ask that you consider enrolling in it. It is a recognition and certification program for residents. So if you enroll, you can get this pretty blue sign that's shown here. And in addition to our program for residents, we have a program to certify golf courses, businesses, and schools. And if you apply to be a river friendly resident, you'll get a checklist of different actions to see what you're doing on your property. And I bet the people on this call would probably pass with flying colors and move right to resident. But if you're newer to green infrastructure and river friendly practices, there are training and resources available from the Watershed to help you learn. The actions in our program are divided into 4 categories: reviewing water quality, water conservation, habitat, education, and outreach. Thanks, Kory. I'm done now with that slide. So the last slide, we've just tried to sum this up to just say that this evening we've talked a lot about things that individuals can do. And we list here some of the resources that Kory pointed out. In addition to our River Friendly program, Rutgers Rain Garden Manual is excellent. The Jersey Friendly Yards website, Kory will give you our native plant nursery list. But also to think about how can you approach this as a neighborhood problem? Because we get a lot of calls at the Watershed and complaining about flooding, and often it's one neighbor flooding another. And working on things together can really create community. And I know that Annette did a great tour around the Colonial Lake neighborhood, and there's some plans to work together there. So maybe that can be a test case in Lawrence. And lastly, not to forget that policy is really important, and this is a complicated issue. Obviously, there are costs involved, so it's important to be speaking with our elected officials about this and moving towards a really comprehensive and data-informed approach. So with that, I will, Kory, maybe you can stop sharing and we can see if there are any additional questions.
There are some questions. I'm going to just share one more slide myself. Can a neighborhood make a difference? Here is a study that was done in a neighborhood. This is in Minnesota, but they had two neighborhoods. They had a control neighborhood and another neighborhood where they put in 17 rain gardens. And this graph on the right shows pre-construction and post-construction, and look at the difference. 93% reduction in the overall runoff volume from the neighborhood that had the 17 rain gardens installed. So that's not just the stormwater, but it's all those nutrients and the pollution that's getting infiltrated. And then here's a different study in Madison, Wisconsin, that was looking at leaf collection and the total phosphorus that was removed when they were doing a faster leaf collection. So not having the leaves there in the street going into the streams and the water. So I'm going to stop sharing, go back to questions. So individuals can make a difference in so many ways. That's a good summary too, Sophie. A couple of questions that I got off the chat. And of course, people can speak up also. You can turn your microphones and your cameras on, or you can put it in the chat, we'll read it. But somebody asked, can a downstream community sue an upstream community for not being responsible for what they're sending down their way?
So that would be a great question for Mike Pissarro, who is our policy director. I have never heard of that, and I don't believe so, but Noemi, I will check with him and I will get back to you.
I do know, because I learned from you and Mike, Sophie, that residents from other towns can go to meetings, town council meetings, when ordinances are coming up, and can say, hey, we're downstream, you're flooding us, please don't do that. Or we're upstream, we have we're doing a lot of green infrastructure, we think that you should be doing more of that too. So we can support one another.
Absolutely.
Another question was about costs. That might have been you, Noemi. Do you want to ask your question about costs? Or whoever asked that?
Yeah, I asked. Yes, thank you. So we own our little modest home and we want to run it in the best way possible, but there are like budgetary limitations. So, I mean, I look at my yard and I know already how the water flows, and it flows off our roof and our solar panels. And there's one side that's really wet. I'm interested in the downspout planters and in a rain garden, because we have our sump pump draining to our yard, not the street. We rerouted it. What kind of dollar amounts are we looking at, not being very handy DIY folks?
So the rain gardens, it of course all depends. The rain gardens, I believe that we had priced it out at somewhere around $8 to $10 a square foot. If you were putting in rain garden soil that you were purchasing yourself. I think that if you were to dig your own rain garden, which is the one part that I really do not like and would rather hire somebody to do, but if you dug your own rain garden, that saves a huge amount of money. And then you can amend your own soil to be able to create your own rain garden soil. The problem is getting that sand. So you need to use the Mason's sand, not playground sand, because Mason's sand is just, there's no fines in it.
Okay, yeah.
So, and then just buying the plants that you need. So the plants are going to be possibly expensive, depending on, where you get them, and what size you get. I would suggest starting out with something smaller. So if you can buy like the little pint size plants, I think you would be able to save a lot more money on that. Or even, you know, just getting something that maybe at the end of the year, all these grasses and everything go dormant. Nobody wants those ugly plants, but they're actually fantastic. So see if you can grab those. And yep, that's another one that Sally just put into the link. The Isel plants does sell the landscape plugs. So the landscape plugs are 1 inch by 5 inches deep. And what I have found is if you plant those landscape plugs now and they have a whole season to grow, they're pretty much 1 gallon plants by the end of the summer. So that's an option. So anyway, for rain gardens, if you dig it yourself and then amend your own soils, it really is not that much, and then find reasonable plants, you're saving quite a bit of money. And I would say it's even cheaper than $8 a square foot. The vegetated filter is as much as you want to spend on plants. You really don't have to amend anything. The downspout planter depends on whatever material you want to use. So if you have timbers at your house that are being unused and you want to use those, I hear that those livestock troughs are impossible to find right now with COVID. Everybody's gone nuts buying stuff like that. So, and they're kind of expensive anyway. So anything that you can find that can maybe capture that, or building your own with any kind of wood that you're able to find that can be outside, is super easy to do. And just make sure you have the overflow. And that is something that I can provide to you too, is the specs on how to build that, which you can find through Rutgers or Philadelphia Water. Either one has that information.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
We had a question that came in about she went to, it was Kate actually, who's building a rain garden, and she went to the local nursery, and the salesperson, who seemed informative there, suggested that she put the landscaping material in between the rocks. And what do you think about that?
So you're talking about the landscape fabric?
Yes.
Okay, so I wouldn't use landscape fabric for anything except for that. So where your water is flowing in, or maybe where you have your overflow and you put stones to be able to help it so that it doesn't erode. So in the entrance and the exit of your rain garden, that's where you're going to put stones. You do want to put landscape fabric, because otherwise those stones will start to migrate through the soil and will end up disappearing over time. And with the fabric, it'll keep them up and they won't sink into the soil. And just to go back to Noemi and actually everybody on the call, if they wanted a stormwater evaluation, I can go to homes to be able to provide that too, just to give some guidance on anything that they might need if they have questions and are not quite sure.
I have a quick question about the green roof, and that is that we have we redid our roof so that it faces north-south. So we put solar panels on the southern part, but so the only thing we have available for a green roof is a north-facing roof. Is there a particular way the roof must face in order to be a successful green roof, and not just a big pile of mud on top of your house?
No, it doesn't matter which direction it's facing. There are plants that can handle all of those different areas. So there are quite a few plants that can handle shady areas. So that happens too with big trees. Sometimes your green roof is maybe facing south, but it's underneath a big tree and will be very shady. So there's plenty of plants out there that can handle that kind of an environment.
But Kory, you want to be careful when you're adding a roof to a house that wasn't designed for a green roof, right?
Most definitely, yes. So you're going to want to have an engineer help you with that because it does add a lot of extra weight to your home. So thank you for pointing that out, Sophie.
Ephraim has a question about how would you convert a vegetable garden to a rain garden?
So are we still going to put vegetables in the rain garden? So that's one question. And vegetables don't usually handle inundation very well, so I wouldn't put vegetables in there, but that is a good question with regards to, I'm going to like just go off topic a little bit. If you are using water from a cistern, rain barrel to water your vegetable garden, don't put it on your plants, just put it in the soil around the plants because there's bird poop and environmental pollution that has landed on your roof and is now in that cistern. So it still can be used for your vegetable garden, but you don't want to put it on the plants, you want to put it in the soil. But if you were to convert a vegetable garden, and I'm assuming that well, it wouldn't matter if it's above ground, but this is everything I'm thinking about is like above ground planter. Just as long as your downspout, there's positive slope with your downspout going into the rain garden so that it doesn't back up to the house. Then all you would do is make sure there's a little bit of a bowl that you create with the pit that you dig, and then fill it in with rain garden soil. And then put the plants in there that like rain gardens, which those manuals that I gave, that I showed earlier will definitely give you some ideas on plants that can be used.
And how about deer? Would they be deer resistant?
So some of them are. We have black-eyed Susans all over the front of our building, and the deer don't seem to eat them at our place unless it's COVID. And then apparently when it's COVID times, then they come and eat it, but otherwise they don't. And there are blazing star that the deer don't eat. There's cardinal flower and mint, mountain mint, and all kinds of things, Juncus effusus with soft rush, that the deer don't eat. So there are plenty of plants that they don't, well, I shouldn't say, they don't seem interested in. They might give it a little nibble once in a while, but they seem to be pretty unpalatable to deer.
Thank you.
So I just put in the chat a book that I found recently, which answers this question. It's really awesome, and for each plant, it tells you, what kind of environment. There's quite a few that like wet soils that you could use, and also other things that go well with it. So it's kind of cool. There's a lot of really amazing wetland plants native to New Jersey. It's actually, my question is about, I've already started redoing my yard. I started last year after a webinar on Doug Tallamy's book. And I've been kind of obsessed ever since. So I have a part of my yard, my sump also drains into my backyard, and that side of the yard is very wet anyway. I think I'm kind of at the bottom of the hill, so I get everybody's water. And I've just been adding plants. Is it okay just to do that? I've been adding plants and trees, and I haven't done the sand bit. Is that okay? Because I've heard now in 2 webinars, you're supposed to add this layer of sand.
Sally, are you over by Colonial Lakes?
No, I'm in the village.
Okay, so just from your description, it sounds like your property would not handle a rain garden, because your rain garden is supposed to be in an area where the high water table is 2 feet below the bottom of the rain garden. So
okay.
if you dig down, if your rain garden was, let's say, a foot deep, if you dug down another 2 feet, are you hitting water? If you're gonna hit water at 3 feet, then you shouldn't install it.
Okay, yeah, there's a
So-
stream, there's a stream close by, I think so. I don't, yeah.
So your house is not, your property sounds like it's not suitable for a rain garden, but it's very suitable for a vegetated filter, which is basically just planting a bunch of plants that do really well there and absorb water. And I always thought in the past that woodies like trees and shrubs absorb more water, but that's not necessarily true. Our perennials do as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm doing a whole mixture of stuff, but
Okay,
the other question, if I could ask another one, I posted it in the chat too. It's like, there's a house up the street where, and I think there must have been, you know, a stream coming down my street. It's Titus Ave in Lawrenceville, and there's a house up the street where it gathers along the side of their house, goes through their yard, front yard, pools a little bit in the front yard, then goes into, if it's really raining hard, it goes across their driveway, taking half of the gravel with it, and then down the street into the storm drain. After one of those big storms last fall, like huge amounts of gravel went into the drain. And I think there's new people living there, and they have little kids, and I think they're like totally overwhelmed. And I want to help them, but I don't know what to do. I haven't actually met them yet. And you know, I sort of wish there's only 15 people on this call. I wish the entire town were here, you know. How do you reach the people that really need to hear this stuff?
it's a good question.
Well, you know, I think the way we've been having success is really going neighborhood by neighborhood. So there'll be somebody like you who has figured this out. And if you have connections in your neighborhood and you start walking around talking about water, I mean, we found kind of, it's almost like a children's storybook that you'll start walking around with a little group of people, and then other people will come out. And then what we do usually is go and take a look around, and then Kory's been doing her wonderful research. And then we have a Zoom meeting with everybody from the neighborhood so everybody can see. And it's really helped, I think, a lot of conversations for people to understand where the water's going, how their properties are interrelated, and to bring people who aren't necessarily so attuned to all of this, just make them aware of how important it is. And that, you know, so many people's basements are being flooded. If you start talking about flooding, people really start paying attention.
So Sally, just let us know when you want a neighborhood evaluation.
Okay, so I can just call the Watershed Institute?
Yes, you can contact myself or Sophie, and we'll go ahead and set that up. You may want to talk to some of your neighbors to try and get a little
Okay.
bit more group buy-in so that we could do that and have it, you know, be a little bit more impactful.
Well, that might be actually how to do it. It's just like, hey, you know, we're having all these storms and all this water, trees are coming down. Let's have an evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just,
Well,
if I can just throw
I
out there
love,
also.
I was just gonna say, Annette, you know, it would be neat to track all of this in Lawrence, just the way, you know, you showed these studies. It would be great to track over time and see if it helped people's stormwater issues. And
Yeah, everyone sign up for our Sustainable Lawrence newsletter and become a member. You're welcome, of course, to come to any of the Sustainable Lawrence meetings, environmental committee meetings. And if we also all kept in touch too about what's going on in our for us at Lawrence, then that will help us when we're revisiting the ordinances as well.
I think having a very visible demonstration project, you know, maybe at the municipal building or wherever, would be a visible location in town that can help with education also.
Yeah, and the more people see what they look like, and that it can be maintained, that it can look beautiful, that it doesn't cost a lot, then more people will accept the idea and join in. There's a lot more we can talk about but it is 8:36. So we'll send the recording out. We'll send all the links out and the information. I have to make sure I copy the chat. And if anybody has specific other webinars or meetings, please let us know. And we'd love to talk about it. And-
Is it okay to share the recording with neighbors? Or is it only for registered people?
Oh, no, please share.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and Sally,
Yeah.
let's talk about a project if you want to collaborate.
Yeah, I actually really, I have a couple of ideas already, so. Well, I have more than a couple. But I have to pick something I can actually do.
Well, there's a lot of people interested, Sally, so I think we could find you some help too.
Okay, I'll be in touch. Thank
Yeah.
you. So you're gonna send out like an email contact
Yes,
list?
a follow-up email.
Great.
And I wanted to end on something that Ed Frankel from our, he's been a longtime member of Sustainable Lawrence and the Environmental Committee. And he, after almost 35 years, retired from the DEP as the acting bureau chief of the Bureau of Non-Point Pollution Control. And he said something so basic that's so easy to remember. Anything that you leave on the ground is going into our water.
Mhm.
So I think that's a pretty good ending. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, everyone. And please, if you have other questions, don't hesitate to contact any one of us. I appreciate your time tonight.
All
Thank
right,
you
good night,
for
everybody.
thank you for what you guys are doing too.
Thanks.
Bye.